Time to get you into the morning show room. Bring in Mark Jacobs, and we have a guest. Mark.
Hey, good morning. Friday morning. John Jenkinson is with us. We're going to talk a little bit about Kansas agriculture. Good morning, John.
I was kind of encouraged. Your wind is only supposed to be up to 25. Here in western Kansas, they're forecasting wind up to 70 today.
Yeah, I think I read some things where it said the gusts could be 60. They've really they've actually cited a potentially dangerous situation in southeast Kansas, including Sedgwick County. So it could be an interesting day here weather-wise. Let's talk about the big ticket. The hot topic of the week is tariffs.
Yeah, that has been on everybody's mind ever since the president spoke to Congress and brought up the topic of tariffs. And if you go back a little further than that, Mark, when the president was talking about tariffs, it started to get some people kind of, I guess, nervous or uneasy. But what a lot of people don't understand is the United States has been operating in a trade deficit for many, many years. And I know that we've talked about this before, but take, for instance, ethanol. If we send our ethanol fuel to Brazil, Brazil charges about a 28% tariff on our ethanol going into their country. But we only charge 2% for Brazilian ethanol coming into our country. And that Brazilian ethanol that's coming into our country at 2% is competing against our United States ethanol producers, our corn farmers, everybody here in the United States. And where they are able to make it and sell it and ship it cheaper than what we can, it puts us at a real disadvantage. And that's one of the things that the president is working on. And it's not just ethanol. It's vehicles. If we were to buy a BMW from Germany, it's the same thing. There's a 2% tariff for those vehicles coming in, but to sell a Cadillac to Germany, it's I think I saw a 24% tariff, and that's what he's wanting to do. And in fact, the president made it very, very clear that these tariffs would be reciprocal. Whatever some other country charged is what we would charge, and that's called level the playing field, and that's what this is all about. And so there's a lot of folks very nervous and upset and worried that we're going to lose because of these tariffs, but actually we'll actually be able to gain, if not bring more production here to the United States and keep our money in our own country.
Yeah, I can see that. If it's a bad business deal. I mean, if you're selling for less than if you're selling for way more than what other people can buy from, it just makes it a thing. A little bit, cash prices are way down. What can you tell me about that?
Cash prices, well, and this has nothing to do with tariffs at this point. Maybe it does a little bit just because of the fear. But cash prices have been depressed now for about a year and continue to be depressed because we've done such number one, such a good job of farming. We have an abundance. But B, we've had other countries that are producing now what we used to be exclusively producing. And I'll give you an example. 25 years ago, Brazil had a terrible time raising soybeans. Well, now they're the number one soybean producer in the world. Same thing with corn. And they have what is called a safrinha corn crop. Their environment is such, and their climate, I guess I should say, their weather, is such that they can raise 2 corn crops a year. So they've become super competitors against the United States. And they can, as I mentioned earlier, they can produce it and grow it and sell it and ship it much cheaper than we can in the United States. And a lot of that goes back to regulation. And so there's just a glut of grain on the market worldwide. There's some other economies that are suffering, so nobody's buying grain, and that's what's depressed some of these grain prices. And that's why we're in the position we're in at facing a year of maybe coming up short for profits again this year because input costs were so high and grain prices were so low.
Are we seeing any, this is a little bit off topic, but are we seeing anything down the line that can help with, say, egg prices and cattle prices? Or are we just still with with a slow supply line.
We're going to be with this for probably at least until mid to late 2025. And I know that our listeners aren't going to want to hear that, but here's why. Because we're trying to rebuild the cattle supply. There was a drought, a severe drought in cattle country 2.5, 3 years ago. And a lot of cattlemen had to sell off their cattle because they didn't have any food to feed them, and you couldn't afford to feed them corn. And so those cattle that would have become hamburgers and steaks were all sold a long time ago. That caused the prices at the grocery store to drop. Well, now we're short of cattle. And so we are short of cattle that are ready to go to market to become beef. So this is going to linger a while because it takes a while to fill that cattle pipeline again. Same thing with eggs. We've had such a terrible time with bird flu that we have to rebuild our flocks that have been decimated by bird flu. And that takes a while. So, yeah, these high prices at the grocery store are going to, at least for eggs and for beef, are going to hang around. It's not because of the economy. It's not because of the president. It's not because of farmers. It's not because of ranchers. It's just because that's the way this ebb and flows, this cycle. And we're kind of in a 10-year cycle now with this cattle market. And I believe that in 2026, we'll start to see this tide, this 10-year cycle, go the other way.
So late next or early next middle of the next year, we'll see more cattle being sold for production.
I believe so. And here's why, because by then we'll have the pipeline somewhat filled again, unless we have another disease outbreak. We've got to get this bird flu under control because it is taking a devastating blow to farmers and ranchers and egg producers and of course the consumers as well. And I know that a lot of states, a lot of federal agencies are doing all they can to try to find a vaccine to get ahead of this.
All righty, we're with John Jenkinson this morning. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after these messages. We're back on the BW Morning Show talking with a little bit of agriculture with John Jenkinson. And, of course, you can catch John Jenkinson's Ag Minute every Monday through Friday at 6:30, noon, and 5 p.m. on the newscast. John, it's getting to be that time of year. If the decision hasn't been made, it will be made shortly about people, farmers, and what they're going to plant this season. We're talking corn and soybeans. Are you hearing anything or any trends out there?
You know, about 6 months ago, everybody was talking about maybe more corn this year than soybeans. Then it kind of switched with input costs. Some farmers, particularly in some of the I states, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, we're talking about, well, you know, if the input costs are going to stay like they are, our return is going to be better on soybeans. And so at one time, there was quite a bit of talk, even after fall harvest, where farmers were saying, you know, I think I'm going to stick with more soybeans this year because it costs less per acre to put a soybean crop in. Well, that has shifted again. According to some of the talk in the trade, some are saying that, well, you know, maybe we ought to plant soybeans because it is still cheaper than what putting a corn crop in. But Brazil has signaled that they may have more soybeans this year. And with the prices that we've seen, the cash prices we just talked about a little bit ago, now it's got some in the trade thinking that some farmers are going to want to switch back to more of a corn crop. The one thing to keep in mind here is a lot of farmers had their minds made up before December 31st and already had some of their seed booked for the year. That's going to be kind of hard to change because once you book your seed, you're kind of locked in unless you really want to, you have a really good seed dealer. But number two, the other thing is rotation. So many farmers now have a rotation of corn, soybeans, wheat. They rotate their crops. And this is for not only weed control, but it's also for a lot of different reasons. It just kind of works best in your farming operation. And to change that rotation is a lot of work and a lot of expense, and things just don't always fit well. So, yeah, there could be a few acres switch, but the acres between corn and soybeans planted nationwide are so close that if there is a switch, it's not going to be a big, what do I want to say? It's not going to be a big difference. There's not going to be this huge shift to one or the other. So we'll continue to watch it. But as far as the radar goes, it's not anything big on the radar. The trade may want to trade it and say, well, we want more. We're going to put more of our faith in one or the other, but it's not going to be a game changer.
All righty. One last question before you go. We've got a couple minutes left here. Wheat conditions, how's the crop looking out there, or is there a crop left?
I'm glad that you asked. I was at the farm this week, Wednesday, I guess it was. All of our wheat in Meade and Gray County on our Jenkinson farm is out of dormancy. And for the listeners who don't know what that is, it's come out of its winter nap. So the wheat is growing in southern Kansas. Just further to the north, some of the wheat is now starting to come out of dormancy in part of central Kansas in some areas. We're going to need some moisture here pretty quick because this wheat is starting to grow. Even though we have a little bit of subsoil moisture, we're doing pretty good. And some of this wheat looks pretty decent. We're going to need a little bit of help on this topsoil, particularly if we're going to have this kind of wind, because wind just dries that topsoil out so bad. And I know a lot of guys are already fertilizing their wheat and putting down some herbicides. So we're off to a pretty good start for the wheat crop this year. There are some isolated areas that things look pretty tough, but we're going to keep a sharp eye on it and hope for some really good spring rains to get us to harvest.
Yeah, everybody's looking for rain right now. I appreciate your calling in, and we'll talk to you in a couple, 3 or 4 weeks. BW News is right around the corner.